And that's why I tell you, Christians, pray. Pray everywhere. Don't act like, well, let me tell you another one so you understand what's coming. I told you, I tell you the news before it happens. Okay? Do you ever hear of COVID-19 compliant churches? That's coming. COVID-19 free churches, or in some places it will be called COVID-19 compliant churches, and then COVID-19 free churches. And if you allow your church to be that labeled, it's not the church of Jesus Christ. Because you don't know what that means. COVID-19 compliant churches will mean churches that people who are infected with COVID-19 cannot come there. Is the church of Jesus Christ not a place of healing? Okay. So those of you who love to run around government officials to get your validation, go and get COVID-19 compliant registration for your church. That's the last day Jesus will be in that church. So, but that's coming. And I pray that you don't let it happen in your country, because you may not understand it. But I'll read some things to you from the Bible so you can understand. I'll read to you from the Bible, because this was where it was going all the time. I told you. In different cities, countries, states, before the government authorities went ahead with the lockdowns, they held meetings with pastors, leaders of churches. Why did the pastors and leaders not say, give us a few days to go and pray? Why didn't they do that? Because they were not prayerful before. So prayer didn't come to their minds. Hearing such a thing as ministers of God, and you're called for such a meeting, you couldn't say, give us a few days. Then you would call all the ministers and say, this is what we just heard from the government representatives, maybe from the governor, maybe from whoever. And you say, we need to pray. We have asked them to give us 3 days, maybe whatever number of days, for us to pray. Then you would have seen the hand of God. But you weren't thinking about the Father's house. You know what it is to shut down the congregations of the Lord? Do you know what that means? It never meant anything to you. That's why. Never meant anything to you. And the pastors and ministers that were sending strong warnings to others not to venture to enter a church because of the virus. Because Christ has never truly been your Lord. You've been the master of your life all these years. You've never truly known him. You've never known him. So, ministers of God gathered together and shut down the congregations of the Lord. How many said, Let us pray. Give us time to pray. They consulted you. They consulted you in different nations. They consulted you in different states. How many of you called for prayer to say, let us pray? Instead, you say, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Especially since for some, there was going to be a compensation for the period of the lockdown. You be compensated. What compensation is enough to replace the praise and worship of God's congregations? I hope you have enjoyed the time so far where only you in the cathedral did online transmission. Hope you enjoyed it so far. Just tells you what's coming. I told you I have a lot to tell you. I wanted to first deal with what is inside the house. Or rather, what is outside before we discuss inside the house. I want to deal with the outside. But thank you very much for what you did to the house of God. And now they're going to consult you again and tell you that before they open your churches, you must agree for the testing. Because one of the fastest places that they are not able to get a lot of people tested. So they're going to need you. Because people are not going for the testing. So they're going to use you and say, okay, church is a good place for testing. So set up test centers for churches. COVID-19 compliant churches. What they're using to test, do you know what it is? Do you know why it can show positive or negative? Do you know? A virus, they told us they are still studying. They are still studying it. Why don't they study it first? They are still studying it. And they already have a vaccine that could be ready in July for a virus they are still studying.